Welcome to Stakelbeck Tonight. I'm Eric Stakelbeck, and this is a date that lives in infamy, October 7th. It was 2 years ago today that Hamas carried out the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust, invading southern Israel and slaughtering 1,200 people, men, women, children, the elderly. Hamas terrorists did not discriminate as they gleefully butchered innocent people in their homes. Of course, they also dragged 251 people into hellish captivity in Gaza. As we mark the 2-year anniversary of that dark day, Hamas is now nearing total defeat. It will either accept the terms of President Trump's peace plan, release the remaining hostages, and disarm, or it will be wiped off the face of the earth. There's no middle ground. Gaza was once a crucial part of an Iran-backed ring of fire that surrounded Israel on all sides. But October 7th set off a chain of events that saw Israel dismantle that ring piece by piece and even strike the head of the snake, Iran, with heavy blows that have transformed the region. So how did we get here? And what comes next? Jonathan Conricus is a former spokesman for the Israel Defense Forces and currently a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington, D.C. He's a good friend and one of the world's top experts on all things Middle East. I sat down with him recently in Jerusalem to break down the current state of play in the region and how it affects you. Operation Rising Lion, we talk about the head of the snake, the Iranian regime. Stunning victory for Israel on many levels. Jonathan, talk about the years of planning and intelligence work that went into this operation, which really stunned the world and has left the Iranian regime in many ways in a very, very bad place.
It's a work in progress. It's a milestone, a very positive one for the free world, for the West, for freedom-loving countries in the Middle East. And I think that there was a collective sigh of not only relief, but really astonishment with the Israeli achievement of actually penetrating Iranian airspace, dismantling air defenses, and striking almost all of the components of the Iranian nuclear weapons program. It was contrary to what many in the region and in the world believed would be possible. And I can share that I know of threat analysis and assessments, even at the Pentagon, that assessed totally different casualty numbers in terms of air crews and planes if Israel would do what it did. And I'm happy that those assessments were not accurate and that Israel was able to do what it did to accomplish those very important military achievements without even one airman or woman being wounded, and we had one UAV that was shot down with no significant results of it, but no manned platforms, and nothing else of substance really happened against Israeli troops, and that's tremendous. That's almost perfect, and is way beyond what we thought that we would be able to accomplish. Now that's a result of many years of planning, of serious, detail-oriented intelligence analysis, of focusing resources on understanding, mapping, analyzing Iranian capabilities, their military capabilities, their air defenses, of course, being, like a hawk on the Iranian nuclear program, all of its components, because as we know, it's usually not about hardware. Hardware, you can build again, you can acquire it again, and sadly, there are many rogue nations in the world that are willing to supply the Iranian regime with the components that they need for the nuclear program. China, Russia, North Korea, Pakistan, other countries that sadly, recklessly are, fueling madmen and giving them the tools, the possible tools for weapons of mass destruction. But Israel, what it did, I think in its wisdom, was to track also the personnel. And out of the many achievements that Israel was able to accomplish, I actually would say that probably the biggest one was the key personnel, the scientists, the scientific minds, the key players of the Iranian nuclear program that were taken out, 9 in the first salvo, and then 3 additional ones. Important for people back at home to understand, we're not talking about civilians. These were people who were working for the military, working for the nuclear weapons program of the Islamic Republic, and who knew extremely well what they were busy developing. They knew that they were leaders and managers and drivers of Iran's nuclear weapons program.
They were ideologically invested in this.
Oh.
The Iranian Oppenheimers, in a sense, totally invested in this in an ideological sense.
100%.
Mission of the regime.
And that is why they were a legitimate target, and that is also why it's so important that they no longer are around, and that centuries of accumulated knowledge, experience, and know-how no longer are available to the Iranian regime. And that means that the Iranian nuclear weapons program was really pulled back. But at the end of the day, if you don't have people who know what they're doing, then you can have the best centrifuges in the world, but you won't get far.
There's no one to operate it.
Yeah. So that, I think, is a very important and sometimes overlooked achievement. I think Mossad, there was this TV series, Tehran, by the Israeli broadcaster Channel 11, which, of course, is fictional. But if you look at the first episodes of Tehran, a fictional TV series, and you compare what happened in reality in terms of Israeli operations and what Mossad agents did in Iran over an extended period of time, they built the network, the facilities, the safe houses, and everything was in place so that when the order was given by the elected echelon in Israel, all systems were go and all pistons fired in synchronization. That's many years of hard work, many years of sacrifice, many years of investment.
How does that even happen, Jonathan, for Israel to get so entrenched? Amazing for the Mossad to have such assets inside Iran. And we saw it late July 2024 when Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas leader, was eliminated in Tehran under the regime's noses. How does Mossad accomplish that? A period of years, of course. Is a lot of that due to the discontent of the Iranian people against the regime? They're willing to work with Israel, perhaps, against the regime?
Yes, I think that's part of it. It's done, by a lot of creative and hard work. Not so glorious, but, creative, hard, Sisyphic, detail-oriented work by men and women of the Mossad who have been able to penetrate into Iran, establish networks, and that takes a lot of time. That's years of work. And we're not talking about something small and localized in one neighborhood of Tehran. We're talking about a nationwide network of informers, collaborators, agents, people that really were part of a big system. And if I were an Iranian counter-intel officer, this is their Pearl Harbor. This is the blackest day in their history in terms of how badly they were penetrated, at what extent, and over what period of time. We're talking years, and we're talking multi-level, various locations, not far from Tehran, and it was done in quite a spectacular fashion. That was one indication which probably should have sent the Iranians scrambling and saying, something's wrong here, and we have been deeply penetrated. It didn't, and I'm thankful for it. And I have a lot of respect for the Iranians. I have respect for all of my enemies. I have respect for the Islamic Republic. I think that they are great planners. I think that they are long-term calculators. And I think that had it not been for October 7, they would have had us in a pickle. What I think that got the best of them was hubris. I think that they overestimated their own capabilities, underestimated Israeli resolve, creativity, and stamina, which are three distinctively different things, but they underestimated all of them. And I think they did the worst thing that anybody in combat can do. They started to believe their own propaganda. And they started to believe that they can defeat Israel, that by encircling Israel in a ring of fire with these terrorist organizations, these expendable Arabs, this is how the Iranians see them. That's not how I look at them, but this is how Iranians look at them. That Israel was there for the taking, that Israel was weak enough, and with a bit of a push, the Iranians could go in and finish the Zionist entity, as they call Israel. And I think that was really the beginning of their undoing.
Up next, Jonathan Conricus breaks down the global shockwaves emanating from Iran's now non-existent nuclear program. Stick around.
The Iranian nuclear program, Jonathan. We talked about crown jewels. That was it for the regime for decades, of course. President Trump gets involved. The U.S. joins the fray. Talk about the ramifications not only for Israel, but for the Western world of that Iranian nuclear threat being eliminated. It's a global threat. It wasn't just a threat to Israel, but to everyone, including America.
Okay, yeah, it was a global threat, and I think it was recognized as a global threat because there were sanctions against Iran. Hopefully today the sanctions will be snapped back and will be again applied on Iran because they are refusing to stop their nuclear weapons program. Now, to disambiguate here, nuclear weapons can only be obtained by Iran if they have the ability to enrich clandestinely on Iranian soil. And the Iranians, even though reality has changed since Operation Rising Lion and America's final blow to their nuclear capabilities, reality changed. But the Iranian leadership doesn't seem to compute and understand that reality has changed, and they continue to bargain and to deal as if they're still in the same driving position that they were pre-October 7. They aren't. And I think they are going to find that not only is the West really focused and committed to not allowing them ever to have nuclear weapons capabilities, but that they are much more exposed. And if they continue to hardball, they will face two things. Sanctions, which could be crippling for an already very weak and exposed economy. And two, they could face additional Israeli military action against them if they continue to try to develop nuclear weapons. And I'm not entirely sure that they really grasp the severity of their situation. I still see a lot of hubris. I still see this condescending Iranian behavior, lecturing everybody and telling everybody and speaking, very high language about law and order and international law and civil rights and all kinds of things that, it's bizarre to hear it from a dictatorship that oppresses its own people and basically is a failing state. You look at Iran today, the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is a country that is failing to provide its citizens. We're talking about almost 100 million people with the very basic needs for a normal life, water and electricity. Iran today, due to corruption and mismanagement, even though this is an oil-rich and gas-rich country that I think they have the third or the fourth largest deposits of gas and oil in the world, by all standards they should be super rich and they should be affluent, and nobody in Iran should want for anything if they manage their resources correctly. They don't. Their priorities are terror. It is funding terror organizations around the world. It is building nuclear weapons. It's destabilizing the Middle East. And that's what they've been focusing on for the better part of 25 years. Now, the chickens are coming home to roost, and the consequences, sadly, are felt by Iranian civilians. Iran is running out of water. They struggle to provide electricity. There are planned, controlled outages of electricity every day in all of Iran's cities, including the capital, Tehran. They struggle to keep factories open. They struggle to keep government offices open, and kids can't go to school in the warm or the cold months because there's no electricity for heating or ventilating.
It's a disaster.
It is a disaster, and it's a man-made disaster that was focused on, this whole Iranian expansionist, imperialist endeavor. And sadly, the people who face the consequences are the people on the ground, the Iranians who probably have very little to do and very little sympathy for what this crazy extremist regime has been doing over such a long period of time. And I think that the Iranian people eventually will rise up against the Iranian regime, reclaim their own future. When they do, I think that will be a very positive moment for the Middle East, for the Iranian people, definitely for Israel, because even though we're in a better situation today in terms of where we stand in terms of our enemies, we are still threatened by the remains of Iranian terror against Israel. We're still fighting Hamas, they haven't finished yet. Hezbollah still exists, and there are threats that are up and coming in Jordan. And Iran, the regime, still, in terms of its goals and priorities, they are focusing on fighting against Israel. Even though they're 1,000 miles away, we don't share a border, we haven't, never fought them in history, we have no land issues, no nothing. One wonders, why do they care and why are they so fixated with trying to annihilate Israel? Yet here they are. So we're in a good place, but the work isn't done.
Coming up after the break, Jonathan lays out the Trump effect, how the president's policies have remade the Middle East and what that means for America. Don't move.
Can you talk about the Trump effect? Back in office, of course, January 2025.
Yeah.
In general in the region, and in particular when it comes to Iran and the nuclear project in Iran. Obviously, he took decisive action alongside Israel. Talk a bit more about his impact in the region.
I remember very clearly, I was IDF's international spokesperson when Qasem Soleimani was eliminated by the US. And I remember the barrage of questions at the time from international media, the New York Times and CNN, and everybody were calling. And they were, of course, beside themselves with excitement, fear, finger pointing. And the general headline was that President Trump's first presidency has now provoked World War III by taking out this mega terrorist with buckets of American blood on his hands. And I responded at the time that, no, listen, you've got it wrong. This was an act of stability and peace. This was preventive action, not only payback for American blood that this terrorist had shed over so many years, but this was really an extremely important preventive measure because Qasem Soleimani was a brilliant terrorist mastermind. He really had very strong, compelling charisma, and he was a leader that commanded Iranian forces in the region. When President Trump decided to take him out, that was first a very brave decision, and I think that it's difficult to say, what if, but I struggle to see the positive things that we have witnessed since October 7 playing out as well as they have, had Qasem Soleimani still been alive and had he been quarterbacking or along the sidelines of the Iranian war machine. So that's credit number one, and that is President Trump going against a lot of established knowledge and advice and saying, no, this is a bad guy. He needs to be taken out. He's killed Americans. He's a bad guy. He does bad things, and he needs to be gone. And the U.S. took him out. So that's number one. Number two, not enough credit has been given, and I think that there are still people who undermine the cleverness and finesse of President Trump. Many people belittle and think that because of his style of communication and the way that he is forthcoming and approachable, that he isn't extremely cunning and smart. And what I think that the Iranians did was to believe that they had him, that they had his number, that they could figure him out, and that he wasn't going to surprise them. When in fact what happened was that the US and Israel were coordinated extremely well, and in fact were able to lull the Islamic regime into a false sense of security by conducting negotiations, but by having a military option ready the moment that the presidential deadline expired. Day 61, when the president said, you have 60 days, and I come to you in good faith. If we do progress here, and if you, the Iranians, start to show me that you're willing to stop developing nuclear weapons, and if I sense that there's progress to be made, I will tell the Israelis to stand down. And I believe that he would have done it, by the way. But the Iranians, full of hubris, didn't. And they thought that negotiations were an effective shield against any military attack by Israel. And what President Trump did was to outsmart the Iranians, and I think that was a brilliant move. And I don't think that Operation Rising Lion would have happened, definitely not the level of success that it had it not been for that level of finesse, which was crucial in the beginning. They, the Iranians, the Supreme Command, the military leadership, the Revolutionary Guard, their air defenses, their nuclear scientists were all caught off guard because they thought that they were safe. And the leadership of President Trump, what he helped and facilitated Israel to do with providing Israel with weapons and platforms and political cover, I think is historic. I think this will go down in history as one of the most consequential decisions, military decisions by a U.S. president since World War II. Preventing nuclear weapons from a crazy, murderous regime, I think, is a very commendable and worthy goal. Even with the benefit of hindsight, we look at the decisions made in real time by the president. They were very, very good. They were excellent. They were brave, and they were correct. They were moral, and they were accurate. And those are exactly the types of decisions that we expect from elected leaders, to make tough decisions, to be willing to face consequences and risk things, but to do it for a good cause. And that's what President Trump did. And I think in Israel and in the region, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, in Syria now, Egypt, and many other places, the Gulf states, of course, they look at that and they say, these are real decisions by a real leader.
Thanks again to our good friend Jonathan Conricus for that incredible breakdown. Folks, be sure to follow Jonathan on X and across social media.